Hi, good morning, everyone. Okay, so today we'll start with giving a brief overview of what we had discussed yesterday, just a quick recap, and then we'll proceed further with the agenda for today. So, as we had discussed even last week, that starting this week, we will start working on machine learning, and we will see that how machine learning is extensively used nowadays in data science, especially for the predictive data science. So there are mainly three kinds of things that we do with data as a data scientist. The first one was what we called as the descriptive data science, where we see when once we get data, then we analyze that, we look into different properties of the data, and then we see that what has happened in the past. So that's the analytics part, and we see it from different perspective. We see the central tendency, mean, median, mode. We see the dispersion, including the range, skewness, kurtosis, standard deviation. Then we do other kind of analysis using different tools in statistics, like the correlation or the covariance of different features that we have got in our data set. So that was the descriptive data science, where we try to understand what kind of data we have, and then we can do different types of analysis on that one. But in the businesses, knowing about the past is a good thing because we understand what has been happening in my business. What is more important, however, is how is the business going to unfold, what is likely to happen, and can we change the course of the future events. That is what the businesses would like. And therefore, the predictive data science is actually much more important than the descriptive data science. And when it comes to prediction, then nowadays, machine learning is the most important tool that you would have in your hands, based on which the predictions can be done. The maybe about 5 years back, or 6 years, or 10 years back, machine learning was not that dominant. But actually, data science also has become so much important in the lives of the organization because of machine learning. Because with the use of machine learning, we can do very complex predictions, more accurate predictions. And going back to some of the discussion that we had, that why it has become so important part of data science today is because of the convergence of the three forces. The first one is that we have a lot of computing power, so we can do the kind of computation that was not possible to do earlier. The second one is improvement in the algorithms itself. So deep learning has the main algorithm which enables the deep learning optimization is called the backpropagation. And that backpropagation algorithm was brought to a generic method only in 2010. So it's just about 10 years old that deep learning has started becoming much more relevant and feasible. nowadays. So second was the improvement in the quality of algorithms that we have. And third is, of course, that the data itself has become available. So as more and more things are going online, we have more information about the online customers. We have more information about people, how they are liking, disliking their profile on social media, and also now even the more and more penetration of the Internet of Things, where we are getting data from sensors. So all of these things have made the data science as one of the key elements in any of the businesses. So coming back to the importance of machine learning, we saw that why machine learning is now the foundation of the entire predictive data science. Then yesterday we briefly touched upon what is this machine learning, and we first went into the definition of learning itself, and we said that learning is the capability to acquire new information, to acquire new understanding of the information, to acquire new knowledge, behavior, or skill or values. So here the focus is on acquiring new things, new understanding, new knowledge. And we also talked about the key difference between intelligence and knowledge. We have computer and say and different types of softwares that we have on the computer, for example, Excel, or you may have several other very powerful software that you use either in your organization or your customers are using. For example, Excel itself is a very powerful computation system, but it is not, it may be very intelligent system, but it is not a learning system. And why it is not a learning system? Because Excel may be doing thousand things which are very powerful. It can do different types of computation that you need. It can do those computations at a very fast pace. It can take a lot of data and do the computations on that data. But the fact is that as we shut down our computers in the night and then restart again in the morning, Excel, or for that matter, most of the other softwares, they have not learned anything new. They would perform the next day also the same thing in the same manner as they have done last night. So they are very intelligent, but there is no continuous learning. So that's the difference between learning and intelligence, learning and knowledge, learning and any kind of other information that you have. Learning is acquiring new things. So then we went into the next step, that if learning is about new things, how do machines learn, and is it really possible for machines to learn? And we saw that the machines can learn today because learning happens by getting exposed to data. And if we build the ability to find the patterns, find the underlying structure, find the information from the data, then the learnings can happen. And it is already happening in the way that the entire paradigm or entire framework of the software had changed earlier, or even mostly even today. The process is can the process can be seen as knowledge, then software, and then that software will process data. So we have the knowledge residing in the minds of the business people or in the domain expert or even the engineers. That knowledge is translated into a code, and that code will process some data, and that data gives some result to us, and that is the result that we use. So it goes from knowledge to coding. Now that code will process data, and that processing of data will give us some output. In machine learning, this process is reversed. So the data does not come after code. We have data, then that data itself gives us the logic. So once we analyze data, that gives us the logic. And using that logic, we make prediction. So it's data, logic, prediction, rather than logic, data, prediction. So that's where we say that we have now moved to software 2.0. The earlier process is still quite prevalent, but machine learning and the process of whether we derive the logic in different things from data itself, that part is machine learning. So machine learning, machines learn the patterns, machines learn or find the underlying structure in data, and then we are able to use that for making prediction. That's what machine learning does. One of the cautions that we need to take is that once we have this process enabled, that does not mean that any kind of data can be processed and the system would be able to find out some logic. I mean, of course, the system will find out some logic, but we should be able to tell the, or we should be able to make a judgment at what places the logic should be used and what places there is no underlying logic, and therefore using machine learning for that kind of task is just not feasible, or it's just not the wise thing to do. And we saw that if we take a telephone dictionary and there is no underlying logic between the names and the numbers. So even if we feed the dictionary of the entire city or entire town or all cities in the country, and we have a very large database, and of course we have available very large computing power and all this access to deep learning. So if we apply even deep learning or other techniques in the machine learning on a supercomputer for finding out what could be the phone number of a given person. So if I try to predict the phone number of a given person, search is possible. So based on the past data, I can search very easily that what the phone number of a given person would be. But if I want to make a prediction that what the phone, suppose a phone number has been given to a new person, the system would not be able to predict because there is no underlying pattern between the phone number and the names. So trying to apply machine learning on those kind of things is only going to make one fail, because we are trying to apply machine learning on something and in which there is no underlying structure. But in many other areas of business, we will find that there is a rationale of things, there is a structure in data, there is a cause and effect relationship, and therefore machine learning would be effective in those things. So that is a caution that as data scientists we need to keep at the back of our mind, that just because I have got a very powerful tool, it does not mean that I can apply that tool anywhere. There must be some underlying structure. Then we say that machine learning, then very fundamental question, that can machines really learn? And we went into some of the very fundamental discussions about, can really machines learn, or is it something which is a domain of only human beings? And that is what most of the people used to think, that how can a machine really learn? And we went into some other examples, that if we travel through time, then people used to think that how can machines fly? How can machines run or move or travel? But those things have become possible, and those things have become possible because gradually we understood the fundamental principles behind, say, flying, which is the principles of aerodynamics. So once we understood the principles of aerodynamics, then we were able to create aircrafts, and those aircrafts have become, thousands and thousands of times much more powerful than any bird can do. So once we understand the underlying scientific principles behind that, then it becomes possible to externalize those outside the human beings or outside the other animals which we see in nature. So we are able to externalize that outside the natural beings and create artificial beings. And when we create that, then it will be based on the underlying principles, and it does not really need to imitate what we see in the nature. So once we created the aircraft, it follows the same principle. So both the birds and the aircraft follow the same principles of aerodynamics, but uh, aircraft does not fly by flapping their wings. So there would be a lot of difference, but still they are following the same principle of aerodynamics. And then we saw that other things which was supposed to be very human, for example, the the capability to memorize. Now we know that human beings just can't compete with the memory which a computer can have. Even the small hand phone that you have, it can memorize lot much more than any of us can do. So if that be the case, then if we can understood if we can understand the theory of learning, or the computational theory of intelligence, the principles of learning, that, and in that case it is possible to externalize the learning also into the artificial devices, and that's what artificial intelligence and machine learning is doing. So I at this point of time we have not fully understood that how learning takes place, but we have improved our understanding of the learning process substantially, and some of these are getting implemented into the machine learning techniques and the deep learning techniques, which is following a lot of things which are similar to how human beings learn. So human beings also learn from data. They are able to identify the patterns, and that's what we discussed, that the learning also is completely based on the data that you're exposed to. And it is because of that that a person or a child which is born in a Telugu speaking family, he picks up a Telugu language because he is exposed to the words, the grammars, the conversation in that language. And a person who is born into an English speaking family, say in England, that child learns how to speak English because the data that he is getting exposed to is only English language. So human beings also learn based on the data that they are exposed to. Similarly, machines also will learn based on the data that they are exposed to. So data is the key to learning. And then the next process is that just getting exposed to data is not sufficient, because I can download a lot of data into Excel. I can download a lot of books from the internet into my computer, but that doesn't mean that computer will learn from those books. The computer can store those books. Computer can retrieve the information from those books, but until we apply the machine learning techniques, the computer does not learn from those books. So data is important, but also the ability to learn is important. And that ability is brought in through the machine learning algorithms. And these are the algorithms that we will experiment with. We have done a small experimentation yesterday. We'll repeat that experiment. Um, and then we will go into other experiments as well. So we will have data, and then we will see that what are the algorithms, what is the process through which machines learn. Then we discussed briefly about three different types of machine learning. One was called the supervised learning, the second is unsupervised learning, and third is the reinforcement learning. Just to do a recap of that, supervised learning is where we provide the data and the expected outcome. And in terms of statistics, we say that it is X and Y, or the feature and the label, or the predictor variables and the prediction variables. So, taking the same examples that we have taken earlier, if we are given the rainfall and we are trying to predict the rice production for a given year, then rainfall is the X and rice production is Y. Rainfall is the level, sorry, rainfall is the feature and rice production is the level. Rainfall is the predictor variable and the rice production is the prediction variable. So you will come across these terminology quite often. So we need to be aware of all of them. But the most popular term in machine learning would be feature and the level. So feature could be the rainfall, the area which has been sown with rice, how much insecticide has been used, how much pesticide has been used, how much power was available to the farmers. These could be the feature, and the rice production would be the level. So that when we have both of these available in my data set, we use the supervised learning techniques like regression, classification, object identification, and different techniques in machine natural language processing, or different techniques in computer vision. But wherever we have the data and the expected outcome, we use the supervised learning techniques. But there would be many other situations where I have only the data available, but it has not been labeled. It means that the expected outcome is not available. Even then, a lot of machine learning techniques can be used, and one of these things is called clustering. So if I have the data about all my customers which visit the online shopping site, then on different based on different attributes which I have available about the customers, that is their demographic profile, their age, the gender. Then if you have information about their shopping, how much they have spent, so shopping pattern, and what are they buying. So if I have information about their past data, the system should be able to group that into different clusters, and possibly it could come out with one cluster as the cluster of the young professionals. So those who are have started working, they are young, so they have the spending power, but they would spend their money onto specific things, and that would be very different from the another set of customers, which could be, say, people who have young children in their family. So their spending pattern would be very different compared to people who are earning, who are young, and maybe who are not married or married but they don't have kids in their family yet. So their spending pattern is very different compared to what you buy and where you spend the money if you have young children in the family. And that would be still be very different compared to the person who is into their 50s and with grown-up children, and their spending pattern would be very, very different. So it is very, and the clustering algorithms would be able to find out these common patterns, and it would be able to show you that yes, you have three or four or five different cohesive groups customers inside your customer base, and therefore possibly you could do different things for these to attract these different buyer groups. So that process is called the clustering process, and there are several other techniques which we can use even though we don't have the labels or we don't have the expected outcome available. The third one is reinforcement learning, which is learns where the machine learns based on the rewards and punishment mechanism. So, for example, if you want to train the machines in trying to play the game of chess or a game of Go or any other game from Atari or NVIDIA, different types of games that we have, we can train the machines to play that game. And how do we do that? We can define the rules of chess, and then we say that you play according to this rule, and then the computer starts playing. And if it wins, then the moves which has been made which enabled it to win, we start giving it a higher weightage or a positive reward. So in the future games, it starts giving more and more weightages to the moves which allowed it to win or enabled it to win. And we start penalizing those moves which uh, made it to lose the game. And therefore, it may start with some moves with the simple moves, and still one can win. But then both the we play both the sides of the game using the machine learning algorithm itself. So both the sides start learning. So the winner also sees the all the moves of the winner and the loser, and the loser also sees all the moves of the winner and the loser. So both the players, they start incorporating those moves which enable one to win, and then they start giving lower and lower weightage to those moves which made the other party lose. And when the next round is played, then people play more. The machine plays more efficiently because it has learned from the previous game, and as they play more and more rounds of game, they become more and more efficient. And that's how many of the uh, nowadays the machines actually beat the human beings in the game of chess. Starting 1997, the world champions also are not able to defeat the computers in the game of chess. So that's the reinforcement learning. And then we said that now, having understood the outline or an overview of what is machine learning, how the machines learn, now we come into our job is that our job is to train the machines or to make the machines learn. So we'll have data. So we had got the housing price data. We know the objective, what we are supposed to do. Then now we will start training the machines on making the predictions. Okay. So we'll go back to our notebooks now and see that how we can train the machines. And now starts the very exciting part, because now you will get those tools in your hand with which you can take data and start making very powerful predictions. So we'll start with small things, and then we'll start going into more and more complex things as we become more efficient or more proficient in learning how to train the machines. Then we'll start training the machines in doing more and more complex things, more and more interesting things, more and more exotic things. Okay. So first thing first, we import the libraries, different types of libraries that we are going to use. We will import the data. So we'll work with the housing price data itself, which we have used in the past. What we have done earlier is the descriptive analytics. So I will not go into those things which we have already done earlier. I suppose that you have been practicing and you know what kind of things we can do to understand the data that we have. And that understanding is important because that will help us in preparing the data for our machine learning algorithms. So if you recall from our discussion earlier, what are the different steps that we will do in data preparation? We first do different types of analytics to get an understanding of data. So we see what are the columns, what those columns represent. We need to have a dialogue with our domain expert or our customers to understand what has been given in the data. And then we start analyzing the data itself. Is there missing data? And if there is, then we need to have, then we can follow different strategies to handle the missing data. Either we can fill them with mean, median, or mode, or some other fixed number, or by using certain algorithms, we can fill that number, or we can take a decision to remove that data or remove the rows or the columns which have missing data. But now, since the computational part is easier, that call we need to take that whether you want to fill that data with median or mode or whether you want to remove it. So that was one part of it. Secondly, we saw that certain data would come in the non-numeric fashion, and we need to convert that into a numeric fashion so that our machine learning algorithms are able to consume that, because these algorithms will not be able to process the non-numeric data. And there we saw the process of label encoding and the one hot encoding. That non-numeric data, it could be having some order in itself. In that case, we call it the ordinal data. And if those are just representing the names, for example, if it is the name of the city, or uh, the location of the house, as we have in the housing data set, That is, ocean proximity was the field which is giving us the location of the house, whether it is near the shore or near the inland or on the island and things like that. In that case, they are just representing certain names and there is no inbuilt hierarchy. So we saw that if it is containing a inbuilt hierarchy, then we can use just the label encoding. And if there is no hierarchy, then we use the one hot encoding, because and in that case it creates one new column for each of the categories that we have, and whatever was the applicable um, value, that column becomes one and rest all the columns become zero. So that is the one hot encoding. So we'll start with just these two things because these two things we have to do anyway. Otherwise, we'll not be able to use the machine learning algorithm. So we'll start with just doing these two cleaning operation or these two data munging, data cleaning operation. Other things that we have learned, for example, removing the outliers or finding out the features which are highly collinear and then removing them, or trying to find out the new features, as we have seen earlier, that converting total bedrooms at the district level to the total bedrooms per house. Some of those things we'll do later, and we will see that what the impact of those data wrangling uh, processes could be on the actual outcome. We'll do that gradually. But first, we'll do the very minimum that we need to, those operations which we need to perform for my algorithms to run. So as you see in the info, the total bedrooms, there is some missing data here. Everything else is having 20,640 records. The total bedrooms was having 433 records. So it means that there are certain data which is missing here. You'll see how to handle that. Okay. So now we come to the actual machine learning process. We'll first take a simple algorithm of regression. So we'll try to run a regression, which is one of the techniques in the supervised learning. And we'll learn different steps in performing that regression for making the prediction. Okay. So first thing that we do, that in the data set, you may receive the values of X and Y in the same file, or you may receive two different files. One would be containing X and one would be containing Y, or you may receive the files in a mixed fashion. Does not really matter. We need to segregate the features, or we need to bring all the features into one place and the label into another file. So that is the first action that we need to perform. That is what we are doing in our first cell here. X is equal to so and so and Y is equal to so and so. So the kind of file that we have been given, as you have seen in the uh, different data elements or the information about the housing file, what we are going to predict is the house value. This is the item that we are going to predict, and this, therefore, my median house value is Y for me, and rest of the columns are the features. So the first step that we'll do is segregate the features from the labels. Why is that? Because we'll train our algorithms to find out the patterns in the features and then say that find out the pattern or the underlying structure in the features, find out the relationship between the feature and the label. That is what regression was. So we are saying the generic equation of regression was y is equal to bx plus c, and we have seen the example of that. So finding out the b and the value of c is finding out the relationship between the features and the labels. So we segregate the two and we say that, okay, you find out we train the machines to find these underlying patterns or find the values of these parameters. And for that purpose, we segregate the features and the labels. So it will discover certain relationship, then it will see that whether it is able to make the right prediction or not. And that prediction will reside in our Y data set. So first thing we do is that our housing data set, what we have got, we segregate that into two different data sets, X and Y. X contains all the features, Y contains the labels or the expected outcome. So how do we do that? We take the housing file, and from there we drop the Y value, that is the median house value which we are trying to predict. So median house value, since that is the value we are trying to predict, we drop it from the data set and we store the rest of the uh, features or rest of the columns into another data set, and we are naming it as X. And just to recall the command that we have used, housing.drop, and when we are using this syntax drop, then we need to give the names of the columns that we want to drop as a list. So we are defining it as a list. If you want to drop more than one column, then I can put a comma here and put the name of the rest of the columns that you want to drop. Then the default way that it drops will be looking into the row indexes. But since you want to drop a column, we are giving as the axis is equal to 1 or axis is equal to columns. That's what the command would be. So after having dropped the median house value, I will be left with all the other columns, and those rest of the columns are getting stored into into X. Then we store the median house value into Y because that is what my prediction variable is. That is what the value of Y is. That is what the label is. So we store the median house value into another data set, which we are naming as Y. Now that would always be the first step. I need to segregate the X and the Y. The next step that we will do, so let's again revisit what we do. Before even we come to this stage where we are segregating the X and Y, the data preparation stage we have to go through anyway. That is collecting data from different sources, uh, merging the data set because you may not get all the data available in a single place. The file that we have got, all the features are available in a single file, but it may happen that you may get data from 3 or 4 different sources. That has to be merged. So that process is called the data munging process. So data munging process has to be done. Then after having got that data, we will do the analysis of the, are there missing data, are there outliers, is there correlation, and that kind of analytics. So that phase is called the data preparation phase, where we prepare the data for processing. So I'm assuming that all that thing has been done earlier, and now we are coming to the next step, that having got that data, the first thing that we do, if we are going to run any of the supervised learning algorithms like regression or classification, and each of these algorithms will experiment with as we go along. Today we are doing with regression. So we segregate the features and the labels and we put that into different data sets. That's the first stage that we have done. Having done that, I mean, I am just performing the basic things here earlier, basic things here, which actually should have been done before this. Just why it is ocean proximity is just 1 minute. We'll run this once again. So we have read the housing data file. We have seen what are the data fields it contains. So we have 10 different data elements. Then we segregate that into X and Y. Then we are doing the one hot encoding on X. So we are converting the ocean proximity into one hot, and then we get the results here. So after we have got the one hot encoding done, then I'm dropping the ocean proximity because I don't need that anymore. So I have got the values of the different categories that I had in the ocean proximity, like ocean or inland or island. I have got the values of those, and the ocean proximity itself has been dropped. So earlier I had 10 different columns. Now 5 has been added, So out of that 10, 9 were features and one was the uh, label. So in X, I had, let's see here, X shape here. What is the shape of X? So now it is, since we already run the one hot encoding, the value of X has become something else. And therefore, when I say X dot shape, it is giving me the value after the one hot encoding has been done. But we want to see what is the shape of X before the uh, encoding has been done. And therefore, we'll run this step once again. And then if we say X dot shape, it is showing me that I have 9 different columns and so many different rows. After we do the one hot encoding, what is happening that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new columns are getting added, which, and these are the 5 different categories in my ocean proximity. And therefore, this 9 will become 9 plus 5, which is the 14 different columns. And we are dropping the ocean proximity by itself. So I should be left with 13. And that's what you see here. That's 0 to 12, which makes it 13 different columns. So after we have got one hot encoding, I have 13 different columns. But for total bedrooms, I still have only 433 records. So we will replace this with the median or the mean value. Last time I had shown you that how to fill the not available values using the Python commands of fill NA. Now today I would demonstrate to you that how it can be used or how it can be done by using another library, that is the sklearn library, which is called simple imputer. It means that we are imputing the values in those places where the values are missing. So we are imputing the new values. So sklearn is one of the very powerful libraries for machine learning, and we will be using more and more of the sklearn libraries. And later on, we'll also work with the TensorFlow libraries. So again, to repeat what I have been mentioning several times, that in the data science nowadays, what you are supposed to know is that which features are available in what libraries. And that is more important than your ability to actually code, because as we have seen that when you start coding, a lot of help is already available here in Python. So even if you don't remember the complete syntax, you have the online help available. Even if you don't remember what are the parameters which I need to pass to a given function that I call from the libraries, the help is still available. But you would not have the help available in identifying the libraries itself. So that is one of the key things that you will have to learn and remember, as to what are the libraries available and what are the functions which is available inside the library. And as you've also seen that the way Python as a platform has evolved, that there are different types of libraries specializing in different type of function. And even for the same function, you may have more than one library available. And then you have actually the choice available, that whether you want to use this library or that library. For example, for the data visualization, we have already used 2 different libraries. One was the matplotlib and the second was seaborn. Similarly here, for performing imputation function, for replacing the not available data, we have more than one ways of doing it. And the first one we have seen earlier, the second one we are seeing now. So from the sklearn library, we will refer to the impute, and then from impute, we import simple imputer. So simple imputer is one of the imputers, and all of these are contained in the impute library of sklearn. The process again will remain the same, that if you want to use a function from a given library, that first we import it, and then we create an instance of that. So simple imputer is what we want to use. So we create an instance of the simple imputer, and I am just giving a name of IMP as the variable, which is nothing but an instance of simple imputer. When we create the instance of the simple imputer, it is we can pass on different values as to what would be the missing value and what it will be replaced with. So I can define the missing value as the not available value, or I can give any other number also. So for example, the missing value, suppose if you want to say wherever it is 0, replace that with the median. So I can give the missing value is equal to 0. But in our case, the missing value is not even available. So we'll say np.nan, which denotes that these are the not available numbers. Otherwise, if you want to replace 0 with the average, we could still do that, because in many cases, when you receive data, the missing values would be presented as 0. So we can put here in the formula missing value is equal to 0. And then we say strategy. Strategy means that what is the value that we are going to put here. So it can be median, it can be mode, it can be a fixed value. So now, having created this instance of the simple imputer with these parameters, like what is the missing value and what we want to replace that with. So here we don't have to give the formula for median and all. It will automatically compute the median for each column. Now, what it returns is that when the simple imputer returns, it will return an array. An array don't have the column names. So I am just storing the column names before I run this imputation process, so that I can convert that into data frame later on and replace the column name. So we also need to understand that when we call a function, we also need to know that what kind of data it is going to return. So if you remember from our class and the function discussion, that it will end with return, and then what is that it is returning, what is the shape in which the data would be returned, we need to understand. So we need to know the libraries, we need to know what functions they perform, we need to know what are the different parameters that it will expect, and then we need to know that in what shape the data would be returned, whether that would be an array, or whether that would be a data frame, whether that would be a dictionary, that or a tuple. We need to know, and uh, as you start using it, you would come to know. In some cases, you will come to know by trial and error that what is that it is returning. But anyway, you have all the help available online. You can always go and see that what the return value would be. So what happens is that for simple imputer, it will perform all these operations, but what it returns is an array. And since we have found that it is much easier for us to deal with data frames, and therefore whenever we receive the array, it would be a good practice to convert that into a data frame once again, because you become expert in using the pandas data frame. So that's what I am doing. So this simple imputer will return me an array, which I'm converting into a data frame once again. And once the arrays are returned, arrays don't have a column name, and therefore I replace the column names once again before at the time of creating the data frame. I hope this process is clear to you. I mean, all these are not a must process, that is converting that into data frame is not really a must. Even the array, our sklearn libraries would be able to consume. But since it is easier for us to deal and see the data in a data frame, I am just converting them into data frame. So after we impute that, then if you see the, I think we have run this once again. That's what the problem you will incur in the Python libraries again and again, because you run one cell and then you come back and run another cell, and because the data shape has changed, it will show you some errors. So now after I have done the imputation, after I have replaced the missing data with the median value, now if you see, I have total bedrooms as 640. So now my data is ready. It means that now the data can be consumed by the machine learning algorithms. Because I don't have any missing data, I don't have a non-numeric data. You see, all of these are now floats, which are the numeric data. So we are all set to process. We have already done the segregation of the X and Y. So now we are all set. Now, after I have got the data, another step that is a necessary step is to split our data into train and test. Now, why do we do that? Is to ensure that there is some data which is kept aside, which the which we are not exposing to our uh, algorithms during the training process. And that step is actually a very important step, because the system tends to, at some point of time, it tends to memorize the data which it has got exposed to. And that's where, even in our own learning process, if we go to our childhood days or our college days, we we will see that there is a difference between memorization and learning. And how do we distinguish that? Suppose in childhood, all of us used to remember these tables, isn't it? Table of 2 and table of 3, up to maybe table of 19 and 20. Most of us used to remember, or memorize those tables up to 10 or 20. Now, let's see the same example, that you have been asked to memorize these tables. So if I ask you what is 4 into 8, and you will just recall from your memory and say 4 eights are 32. Now, but you may not have actually learned the process of multiplication. So as a child, one can memorize all these tables and still not understand the process of multiplication. So as long as I ask him the question which is inside the table, he will be able to answer. So suppose somebody has memorized a table of 20 into 20. So any value that you ask between, which is represented in the table of 20 by 20, he will be able to answer you immediately. So if you ask him what is 4 into 8, he will be able to answer. If you ask him 12 into 8, he will be able to answer 96 immediately. But the testing of whether he has actually learned how to multiply, the real test would come if I ask him a multiplication which is falling outside these memorized tables. So if he has memorized a table of 20 by 20, if I ask him how much would be 22 into 23, and if he is able to answer, then we know that he has learned multiplication. Otherwise, his answer is actually coming from the memory and not by understanding the multiplication process. That is what same process happens in the machine learning also. So we are giving some data to the machine, and the machine has infinite sort of memory. So after a level of training, it starts a sort of memorizing that data. But that is not what we want the machines to learn. We don't want it to memorize. We want it to find out the underlying logic, find out the underlying pattern. As we want a child to learn how to multiply, the principles of multiplication, and not really able to memorize. And the test of that is that I give him some questions on, or I give him some scenarios, or I give the machine certain questions or scenarios which it has not been exposed to till now. And that data, we keep it separate, and that data we call as the test data. So we segregate the data into two parts. One part is called the training data. The second part is called the testing data. So the training data is the data on which we will train the machines. And then it will say that now I have learned the logic. Now we'll say that, okay, if you say that you have learned this logic, let me test you with something that you have not seen earlier. And then we will ask it to make predictions and show me the efficiency of that logic, which now my algorithm claims that I have learned that logic. I will see the efficiency of that by asking it to process the new data and give me the prediction. And that is why We keep the training and testing data completely separate. We train the algorithm only on the training data, and then we test it with the testing data. And we test the efficiency of the algorithms, or efficiency of how it has been able to optimize these parameters. In the case of regression, how good the values of the parameters b and parameter c is in the equation y is equal to bx plus c. That is what we'll do with the testing data, and that step is very important. Just as we took the example of the child, that if you want to really assess whether he has learned how to multiply or not, then I have to ask him a question outside the tables that he has memorized. Okay, so for splitting the data into training and testing, we call another library called train test split. We use that function, and the parameters that this function expects, apart from some other parameters, is the files that you want to split. So I want to split both x and y, and then you can give the parameter as to how much, in what ratio you want to divide this file into test data and the train data. Okay, so now both x and y will be split into two parts, one for testing and one for training. And therefore, we are giving four different variable names here, because if we give x and y, what it will return is four different files. So four different files, when it returns, I store them into four different variables. So x will be split into x train and x test. I mean, these names we are just giving because it becomes clear to us. Otherwise, we could have given the names A, B, C, D, but then you wouldn't remember what is A and what is B. And therefore, we always give the names which is very easy to comprehend. So we are giving the names here as x train, x test, y train, and y test. So x, my data set x would be split in the ratio of 20 and 80. So I have given test size is 20. So 20% of the uh, observations, or 20% of the number of rows, will go into my x test, and remaining will go into x train. Similarly, the data set y will be divided into two, and we are giving the name as y train and y test. So during the training process, we will use x train and xy, and for testing that how good my prediction is, we'll use x test. So using the x test, the system will make prediction, and that prediction I will compare with y test. So this process also should be very clear in your mind, that we will train the algorithms using x train and y train, and that will give me the final model, or the values of the parameters in the model. So in the regression model, the parameters are all these values of the uh, beta and the b and the value of the c, and it could be multiple values of b, because we had taken the example of the rainfall and the rice prediction. There was only one variable, but we are seeing that in the housing data set, now we are working with 13 different features. So it will be 13 different variables that it will, 13 different parameters that we will optimize. 13 plus one constant, so 14 different parameters that will optimize. So we train the algorithm using X train and Y train. Then we ask the algorithms to make the prediction with some data which it has not seen, and that data would be X test. So we'll say that now you have some new data, make the prediction, and then we'll compare that prediction which it will make with what I have in y test, because that's the actual value. Okay, so first we have done the split using this command. So we call the function train test split. We pass x, we pass y, and we define that what the split size would be, and then I have got the split. So if you see the shape of this split now, after we run this cell, I have got X train. I am printing the shape of that. So earlier you see that we had 20,640 records. Now it is splitting that into two. So I had 13 columns, 0 to 12. So these 13 columns are there in X train, and it has got 16,512 records, which is 80% of this number. And in my test, I have got 20% of this number and all these 13 columns. When it comes to Y, Y had only one column, which is the housing median value. That is the quantity, or that is the number that we want to predict. And therefore, it has only one column, which is the housing median value. And again, just like X and X train and X test, the Y value also has been bifurcated into Y train and Y test, having the same number of records. Or the number of columns would differ, but the number of records or number of rows, that should remain the same in X train and Y train, and correspondingly X test and Y test. So now I have the data available on which I will train the algorithm. Next step is that now identify the model which I want to train. There are different types of models available, and we will experiment with them one by one. We will try to understand which model has what benefit, which model works best for me in the given scenario. So even for regression, you will see that you have a dozen different types of models available, a dozen different types of regression model available. So as a data scientist, what you would be doing is that we take the data and we experiment with different models and see that which model is actually giving me a better result. Because on different types of data, all the models don't work equally well. So one of the things that you will have to evaluate is which are the models which I'm going to experiment with. And if you have a lot of computing power, you can experiment with all the models. But most of the time, you will not have the luxury to experiment with all the models, and therefore you should be able to make a judgment about that. Okay, these are the 4 or 5 different models I'm going to experiment with. So I will run my regression with all of these. I will see the performance of each of these models, and whichever model gives me a good performance, I can choose that. Or nowadays, mostly what we do is that we implement more than one model and say that whichever model gives me the best result, that is the model I'll use for prediction. So we have moved to a stage where even in the real life or even on the production data, we may use more than one model and the best result is being used. That process is called the ensemble model. It means that we create a sort of an orchestra of different models and we choose the best one. We'll come to some of these things gradually, just exposing you to these ideas. So to start with today, we are going to work with the linear regression model. And this linear regression model we have already seen, isn't it? That the formula would be y is equal to b1x1 plus b2x2 plus, and it will go until the bn x1 plus the constant. And what are these x1, x2, x3? All these are the different features. What are b1, b2, b3? All these are the multipliers of these features. So, these are the parameters that the system would optimize. So x1, x2, x3 is already given to me in this data set. X1 to x13 is given to us. All these longitude, latitude, each of them represent x1, x2, x3. So I have here x1 to x13 is given to us. And therefore, this algorithm will actually optimize 14 different parameters, b1, b2, b3 until b13. And when we say b1, b2, b3, it is the multiplier of each of these features and then one constant. Okay. So we are choosing the linear regression model. How it works, that we have seen with a simple example earlier, and we saw that even the Google Sheet gave me an equation, that this is the equation which actually gives you this line. Our system will also find out the same. So we call a linear model from our sklearn library. The process again remains the same. So the first task that we are going to do is instantiate the linear regression model. So first we identify the model. We are selecting the linear model. Then we create an instance of that, and for creating that instance, we call from the linear model, we call the linear regression function, and then we create an instance of that. Now, with this instance, I can call the different functions which is available in that particular class. So the training is done by calling the fit function. Okay. So now I have identified the model. I have created the instance of the model. Now I will train the model. And the function that we call for training is called the fit function. And that will be the same across all the regression models. So it will take and the parameters that we need to provide is the X train and Y train. It means that the data, all the features data which is there in my training set, and all the label data. So it will take these two, and then it will train the model. So let's train the model. So the model has been trained. It means that all the parameters have been optimized. So now that my model has been trained, now I would like to see that how well the training has been done. So if you want to assess how well a child has been trained in say standard 5 or 6, what do? We take a test. And even for you, how well you have learned all these data science concepts, there would be an examination, there would be a test, isn't it? So for me to know that whether you have learned all these concepts, there would be a test at periodic level. So till now I have not done, but we'll do that. I've given you some assignment, but none of you have been able to complete that. So please submit those assignments, because towards the final assessment, I'm going to take those as a part of the evaluation. So I have not really focused on the evaluation till now, because the focus was on making you understand the concept, but that evaluation part will also come very soon. So the same thing is here, that if we have trained the model, then next thing that you want to know that how well that training has been done, and that we can assess on, or that we would like to assess on the testing data. We can always make that assessment on the training data itself. So I can always ask the question that whether he has been able to memorize or a child has been able to memorize the tables or not. So I can ask him, what is 4 into 8? And I expect him to answer 32. But I can ask the out of the data question also to understand whether he has learned the underlying process or not. So that's what we will do in the next step. And to be able to assess that, so we will assess the performance of that using the two parameters that we have learned earlier, R squared and RMSE. Just to recall what these two are, RMSE, the name itself is root mean squared error. It means that we find the error first. Error is the difference between the prediction and the actual. Then we take a square of that. We take the square of that so that we can do away with the neutralization that it will do, or the cancellation that it will do of the plus and minus values. Then we take the average of that, which is called mean in the language of statistics. So we take the average of the squared errors. And since we had squared it earlier, we take a square root. So that becomes the RMSE. So the system would give you the mean squared error, and then we take a square of that separately. So to be able to compute that, we import the mean squared error function from the sklearn.metrics. So metrics is the library in sklearn, which will give you different types of performance metrics. So from sklearn.metrics, we import mean square error. Okay. Now we call the predict function. So just as we call the fit function for training, now for testing, we are asking it to make the prediction. So we are now saying that, okay, the algorithm, now you have learned the underlying structure, you have done the optimization for these parameters. Now show me how good is your prediction. So first I ask it to make the prediction. We call the predict function on the model instance of the linear regression. So linear regression we had instantiated and we had given the name of a model. Now from on that model, I invoke the predict function. And to that predict function, I'm only giving X test. I'm not giving Y test because I am asking it to predict make the prediction on X test, and then I will compare that with Y test. Okay. So while asking it to make the prediction, I'm only passing X test and storing those predictions into prediction uh, variable here. Okay. Now maybe we should segregate and see what is there in prediction. So I'll just put that into two different cells. Okay. We'll ask it to make prediction, and then let's see what does it contain. So you see it is returning an array, and each array has got a value. And these are the predicted value of the houses. So for the first data or for the first house, it is giving me a value of 30,000, 3 lakhs 9,669 as the value of the house. So it says that the data that you have given me in X test, the data of the house that I have given, the value of that house should be 3 lakhs and $9,000. The information that you gave me in as the second record in X test, and X test contains the different attributes of the house. So for that house, the prediction is that the price of the value should be 196,000. For the third house, so much, and accordingly, it is giving me the value of all the 4,128 houses. It gives me the prediction. That is what we have contained now in the prediction. Having got that prediction, I would like to compare that with what the actual value was, because the Y test is available to us. So now I see that how accurate that prediction is. Okay, and that we can see even side by side. What we can do is that first maybe we can convert the prediction into a data frame. And since this one is only an array, let me give the name of the columns here. I'll give that, I'm giving the name as prediction. So now it will convert this into a data frame. And having converted it, so I'm just giving a file name compare, and we'll concat here with the Y test. Y test contains the actual number, and now I have made the prediction, and we'll concat that by column. So Y test will become the first column, and the prediction will become the second column. And then after that, we want to see what is there in compare. So we say compare, and let's see the first maybe 10 records. So we see the first 10 records. Let's see what comes out. So So the median house value is coming NaN in some places. We'll investigate that. Or why it is coming NaN. Let's see Y value separately. So Y test, what does that contain? Okay. So these are the different indexes. So it is actually trying to match the index number. And that's why it is not creating, when it is concatenating, it is concatenating on the index, I think. Let me see here. Ignore index. And then if I run this, okay. YPRED, I don't want to disturb the index now because when we do the comparison with the XO, we'll come to this once again. We'll see the values side by side. So the index numbers which are matching, you are able to see that what is the data in the original file and what is the prediction. So wherever data was 452 was the original house value. My prediction is 309. The prediction was 352. My prediction is 227. And against 342, it is 93 and so on. So you see that there is some pattern, but maybe it is not able to make very good predictions. Let's see that. Now, having made the prediction, now we want to see that how effective that prediction is on the two parameters that we have used earlier, the R squared and the RMSE. So R squared I compute by again calling another function called score. And this requires two parameters, X test and Y test. So now it will compute the prediction and it will compare that with the Y test and it will give me the R squared. Similarly, to compute the RMSE, we call the mean squared error function, and that requires two inputs. One is Y test and the second one is prediction. So I have got the prediction stored here. So I will get the mean squared error, and then we take the square root of that, and that gives me the RMSE. Okay. So I'll get these two numbers, and then we'll try to make sense of these numbers, and then I am printing these two here. Once I run that, now I see that the R squared value is coming to 0.64. Now, what does that mean? What is the meaning of, how do we interpret now as data scientists, how do we interpret what is R squared? I mean, if the R squared value is 0.64, what is the sense that we make out of it? And if you would attempt answering that if the value of R squared is 0.64, what does it actually mean? Either you can type out or you can voice out. Going wrong is fine. All of us are learning here. So even if you go wrong, that's okay. Anyone? Prashant, Rishabh? Yeah, so Hemant is saying that our prediction is good or getting accurate. So this good or bad would still be comparative, but what we need figure out from R squared value, if it is 0.64, it means that if the total variation in the y, which is the variable that we are trying to predict, the total variation is 100, then my prediction is able to capture 64% of that. It means that my prediction or the equation which I have written now, it is able to capture 64% of the variation, and 36% of the variation I am still not able to capture. It means that it can be interpreted in a way that my prediction would be about 65% accurate, and 35% is something that my system is still not very sure whether that. So about two-thirds of the times I would be making a good prediction, and one-third of the time I am not going to make a good prediction. Now comes the second aspect of the interpretation of these, that suppose you have got this number, whether this is good or bad or ugly, that is one of the things that you will have to again interpret and see that in what context, what kind of value would be acceptable. So there is nothing like the best value. There is nothing like the, it is not the question of perfection. Even in machine learning, it's not the question of perfection. It's the question of getting the value which will be acceptable in a given context. Let's say the context is the prediction of the housing price. So even there, just getting an R square of 0.65 doesn't look very good, because if I tell my customer and I go wrong 2 out of 3 times, I'm completely out of sync 2 out of 3 times, then I will not have a very good name in the market. So even for a housing prediction kind of thing, the 0.65 is not really a very good number. We will try to see that how we can improve this number. So that's one of the challenges that you will face, that when you run a given algorithm for the first time, you may or may not get a very good result. And then comes the another skill that you will acquire, that having got this R square, which is not that good number, what are the tools that I have with which we can go on refining this number, or how I can improve the performance of this number. And that's where your skills will actually come in as a data scientist. Okay. So I was talking about that the acceptance of these numbers is relevant to the context that we are in. So suppose if it goes up to 0. 0.8 or something like that, then we'll say that, okay, this is acceptable, because anyway the housing prices will not remain stable. If I am going right 4 out of 5 times, because my R square is say about 80%, if I am 80% close to the reality, then it's acceptable. But suppose the same kind of problem you have got from a hospital, and say that I want to make a prediction based on different parameters of the patients. For example, his different reports that you receive on the different parameters of the blood testing report, different parameters of the scanning reports. I want to assess that whether this person has got cancer or not. Now, there, being right 80% of the time is not really sufficient, because you can't really give 20% wrong diagnosis in that case, because these are very critical things. So there I would look for an R squared value of 98, 99, or in consultation with the doctors and the hospital management, we'll come up with that threshold, that if I am giving a prediction of a person having a cancer or not, I better be right 99% of the time. Otherwise, it's a question of life and death. But if I am making a prediction about what will be the sale of, say, trousers in my store, I don't have to be accurate about 88, 98, 99% of the time. I would be happy to be, having an accuracy of even 80% or 90%, because it's not a question of life or death. So the interpretation of the accuracy of my model, which would be measured by R squared or RMSE, or there are different other measures in different contexts, and we'll go into those things. But you need to keep in mind that practically there is nothing like the best value. It is what is acceptable in a given context. And therefore, the understanding of the context is very, very important. And that's why, if you recall, the first question that you need to ask is that who is going to be the user of the output of your data science analytics, in what context is going to be used, and now you start connecting that context is why that context is so important, because all the work that we do is has to be relevant to that context, and interpretation of R squared, interpretation of the RMSE falls into that category. So R square level which is acceptable in making the prediction of the sales of a trouser, an R square level which is adequate for making a prediction of a house value, that may not be an acceptable threshold if I want to predict whether a person would be having a serious disease like cancer or not. Even in the case of the hospital, suppose in a hospital you are trying to predict that whether a person is having a given kind of disease or not. Again, the threshold for the R square could be different from cancer compared to a common flu. So for a common flu, which is curable, even if my accuracy is say 80%, I would be happy with that, because then I know that even if say 20% of the time, even if I am taking a patient and saying that you have got flu, and if I give him the medicine for flu, even if it does not have, suppose 20% of the time my diagnosis is wrong, and I end up giving a treatment of flu to somebody who does not have, or vice versa, it's not really going to matter much. But the same thing I can't do with a serious disease like cancer. So the interpretation of these will be very much connected to the context that you have, and that is one of the key skills that you need to bring as a data scientist. That is the dialogue that you need to have with your domain experts, with your customer, that what is the kind of R square which should be acceptable in your business. And then you have to work towards refining that, because the refinement, as you will see, is not going to come without a cost. If you want to refine the value from uh, in increasing the value of R square from 0.64 to 0.8 or maybe 0.85 or further, increase in every percentage point is going to take more of a training time, more of a time in refining the data we have, and therefore the refinement process is not going to come free of cost. It will take a lot of computing resources, it will take a lot of manpower resources to be able to improve that, and therefore we have to make a judgment that where are we going to stop. From system perspective, there is no end to just going on making an effort to improving it, but do we really want to do it? So a cost and the benefit comparison has to be done, that how much effort do we put in really to improve the performance of my parameters. Okay, so now I have got a fair idea about that my algorithm is working, but maybe it's not working that well. It is giving me 65% accuracy, or it is able to explain 65% of the variation in my value of y. Then we come to RMSE. RMSE is going to be some number, as we have seen in our earlier examples also. Whether 68,000 is a good number, bad number, that we can make a sense only after we see what is the average value. So how do we find the average value? So I have the Y test where I have the prices of the house. Let's try to find out Y test dot mean. I think it should give us the. If you see, the mean value or the average value is 200,000, and on which you are getting a standard deviation of 68,000. What does it mean? How do we interpret that? Assuming that this is a normal distribution of data, what it means is that about 68% of the houses will be within the range of 200,000 plus 68,000 and 200,000 minus 68,000. It means that 68% of the houses are between the price range of 130,000 and 170,000. Roughly, it's the 270,000. So RMSE seen in comparison with the mean, that is what it gives you the value, that whether it is good, bad, or ugly. So maybe 68,000 compared to 200,000 is still an acceptable range, but not very good. But that will also depend upon how the underlying distribution of the data itself is. Now, the next task that we will take up is, can we improve these scores? Okay. And one of the things that we can do to improve these scores is to experiment with some other kind of algorithm. So we had tried with this linear regression. That was one kind of algorithm. Now I have almost repeated the process that we have done yesterday, going into some further detail, just to ensure that the process is ingrained in your mind. So the steps that we are taking is more important to know compared to the which libraries we are calling. So as I said, that understanding which libraries we call is very important, but even more than that is the different steps that you need to follow. So in today's session, I'll end with just repeating those steps, and then tomorrow we'll see that having got this result from the linear regression, how we start refining this result. And that is a key part that you would be expected to do as a data scientist, that how do we experiment with different models, how do we refine the results. So coming back to the different steps, these steps that we have got, we have here, these steps should be ingrained in your mind. So, if you say that I have done data science, I know machine learning, even if I wake you up from the sleep and say that, tell me what are the steps, you should be able to rattle out. So I'm emphasizing that these steps that we have, that must be very clear in your mind. So step number one, data preparation. Within data preparation, we have different steps: data munging, data wrangling, removing the outliers, all those things. I'm not going into detail of that one. So the first broad step is data preparation. So I'll get data from different sources. I prepare the data for running these predictive algorithms. So step number one, data preparation. After I have got the data, then I split the data into features and the labels. After I have got the data sets bifurcated into feature and label, then what do? We take the feature, we split them into training set and testing set. So I have X, I have Y. I split them into four different data sets, and going forward, we'll also talk about the validation set. But right now, let's not get confused with that. We will take data and we will split that into training set and testing set. Then I identify the model, which is the model I am going to use for training. I take that model, create an instance of that model. Then I train the model. I train the model with my training data set. So I call the fit function, which is used for training, which we have used here. So first we have got the split. After that, I call the model. Then I train the model by calling the fit function, and that fit function will require the training data and training data of features and training data of labels, which we have named here as X-train and Y-train. After having trained the model, then we see that how good my model is, and that's where I ask the model to make prediction. After I have got a prediction, I compare those predictions with the actual values, and then I find in this context of regression, I use two variables here. I use two parameters, and we will go into further different other ways to evaluate. But today we'll be happy with using two different parameters that we have learned earlier, R squared and RMSE. I get some number, and then I see that my numbers are good, but they are not really great. And then we'll see that how we can make my prediction or my model great. That is, how do we improve from here? So those are the things that we'll attempt tomorrow. So I hope this step-by-step process would have given you some idea of how we are going to make the prediction, because for the first few models, we will go slowly and we will spend more time on the fundamentals. Then the next model that we try, we will be able to do much faster. So we don't have to spend that much time when we experiment with the next model. So I hope the process is clear to you. You must revisit this notebook again to ensure that you understand the process involved, because starting tomorrow, when we start experimenting with the other models, we'll start going a bit faster. And of course, you are free to stop me and say that, no, stop here. I need to grasp what is happening. I have not understood what is happening. And again, I am repeating that in case you um, want to reach out to me for understanding certain concept where I have gone fast, or whether you want to spend some more time in getting a better understanding, you're most welcome to do that. So we'll end the session today with that. If there are no questions for today, then we'll end the session for today. And again, we'll go into certain more detail of how to refine these results by using other models, other techniques, starting tomorrow. Is that fine? Okay. So coding part is okay. Um, so one question has come that coding part is tough for me. Well, in the beginning, anything new that you do will be tough, but I can assure you that after going through the exercises some 4 or 5 times, you will find that it's not that tough, especially because you don't really need to remember the syntax. So I will make sure that by the end of the course, all of you become comfortable in that part of the coding which is required for data science and which is required for machine learning. Obviously, there is no end to how much the Python coding you learn or how much the coding part you learn. But the objective here should be that I learn sufficient coding so that I am able to run these algorithms. I am able to interpret these algorithms, and I can guarantee you that you will be at that stage by the end of the course, even if you are not there now. So don't lose heart. We will go through it, but obviously, coding you don't learn by just memorization. You have to do some practice. Just as I had given the example earlier, that you don't learn cycling, you don't learn swimming by just studying, by just seeing the videos. You will have to put your hand onto the Python notebook, do some coding. It will give you some error. You will correct those errors, and that's how you learn. So again, I'm repeating that about half an hour of time you should keep aside for going through these notebooks. And when I say going through these notebooks, not reading it, but you open the my notebook on one side, you open another blank notebook, and then you put your type out your code there, and then you will see that result will come. Okay, so we'll end the session with that today, and we'll again meet tomorrow where we start refining these models. Okay, and from tomorrow it will be good if all of you keep your laptops open, so that I will do something here and then you do the same thing on your laptop at your end, and then we will do some of these exercises online together. So with that, we'll end the session today, and we'll again meet tomorrow at 7. Thank you.